Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our forum on strike. Is this something that we as workers in the Twin Cities should be doing right now? We are in the midst of a moment of incredible opportunity in our country, where workers across the country are getting very serious about asking the question, do we just need to keep putting up with the way things are, or can we take a stand and actually make changes? And across the country, we're seeing waves of strikes back in what some have referred to as Striketober last fall. And now increasingly here in the Twin Cities, many different unions contracts are expiring all at the same time. And it gives us an incredible opportunity to ask ourselves, is this a time when workers should be using their right to strike? So for that, we are lucky to have a lot of experienced leaders in the Twin Cities, workers who've been out on strike. And they are able to be with us tonight in this forum to learn a little bit about what does it take to go on strike, what have been some of the wins that people have been able to achieve by going out on strike, and what are some of the hard and difficulties and the lessons that people have learned by doing it. So I'm very excited to have our panel here tonight. My name is Greg Namacher. I am president of SEIU Local 26, a union of 8,000 janitors, security officers, window cleaners, airport workers, property services workers in the Twin Cities. So now let me pass it briefly with our, let's do a round of introductions briefly first before we dive into more detail. So Chong?
Hi, my name's Chong Xiong, and I work in St. Paul Public School. I work at Baden Lake Elementary, which has two programs, our regular general ed and a Hmong dual language program. And I teach in the Hmong dual language second grade. I've been in the district for 28 years and a proud member of the St. Paul Federation and educators. And I'm here to share some of my experience.
Great. Thank you, Chong. And Shireen?
Hi, I'm Shireen Horazek. I am the president of AFSCME 3800, the clerical workers union at the University of Minnesota. I use she, her pronouns. And our union, which represents 1,500 clerical workers, has been on strike twice in 2003 and again in 2007, when we were joined, the 1,500 clerical workers were joined by technical and healthcare workers, also with AFSCME at the U of M. And so there were, for that strike, there were 3,000 of us that were out, and I co-chaired our bargaining committee that year.
Great. And our third guest is Eric Crone from SEIU Local 26. Eric, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Eric Crone. I work at Columbia Building Services as a high-rise window cleaner, where I'm also the union steward. I serve on SEIU Local 26's executive board as the window cleaning delegate. And in August, we led a strike successfully to acquire a fair contract coupled with paid apprenticeship for our workers, so we can create a better air of safety in our industry and push standards forward.
Great. Well, thank you all three of you. So to back up again and just talk a little bit about why is now a time for this discussion. You know, whether it is Kellogg's or workers at John Deere or the Chicago Teachers Union, we have seen major strikes across our country at a level that we've not seen for decades. And it is clear that workers are saying enough is enough. So we in the Twin Cities have a lot of great experience, whether it's these SPFE, the teachers in St. Paul that have been on strike, whether it's AFSCME Local 3800 that has been on strike multiple times, and our Local 26 that has been on strike many times over the last decade. In this next month, actually over 10,000 workers have their contracts that are expiring Some look like they have reached settlements and tentative agreements, which is very exciting. Some look like they are still very far from tentative agreements and may need to go out on strike, but it gives you a real sense that the national strike wave is coming to the Twin Cities. And over this next month, we could see thousands of workers potentially go out. So what does it really mean to go out on strike, especially for workers who haven't done it before? You know, many of us have grown up being worried and feeling like, oh, aren't strikes these terrible things where everyone loses and nothing is accomplished? Those are some of the myths that we hear as we grow up, and definitely that we are told by our employers. So there's a different reality, and the folks on this panel are really a great opportunity to hear what are real strikes that have really won in the Twin Cities. Right here, we're just very lucky to have some of the folks that led those strikes here with us today. So with that, let's just say a little bit, if we can, in this round, what specifically did you win? What was the difference between before you went out on strike and as a result of going out on strike? Chong, do you want to go first?
Sure. Before I go, can I just add a little bit that SPFE has a member of about 3,600 members. And, you know, no one wants to go on strike. Okay. No one wants to go on strike, but we do have to do it to get some of the things that we need, and we that are you know, we need as members of a union, as members of our community, and especially for us, for our kids, our children. So in 2020, the St. Paul Federation of Teachers or Educators did go on strike. And we have about 31 proposals. And some of the things that came out of that strike are, and I can list a few here, are mental health teams at each school, which with about $5 million dedicated to hiring more intervention specialists, social workers, counselors, school psychiatrists, and school nurse staff. That's one. Another was additional multilingual educational assistance to support families. And that resulted in, you know, hiring more full-time help in the classroom, in the schools. And then English learners, teachers waited, you know, their case are ELL teachers or EL teachers. Their caseloads are so big, they're so huge, that one of the things that came out of that was that, you know, they got smaller caseloads, which works great when, you know, when you're working with students who speak English as a second language. And then we implemented the integration task force recommendations. And then also another part was commitment to address root cause of public schools fundings, including joint support for the including more for the moratorium of new charter schools in St. Paul, and until a community impact studies can be complete and review. And then we also got building substitutes, you know, assigned to buildings, because we know that this year we are so short of substitute teachers, not just due to COVID and the pandemic, but there's other things that went into it. So these were some of the things that came out from our strike in 2020.
Great. Thank you. I mean, it's an impressive list. I think that took you 2.5 minutes just to go through the new, that's how many things you won as a result of the strike.
And that's just some of the things that we got out of it, you know. And yep. I'm sure that if COVID didn't hit at that time, we might have been able to gain more. Yeah,
that's right. If folks don't remember, when the St. Paul teachers were out on strike, literally they were out on strike for starting their second week. And that was when Yeah, that was when COVID hit the Twin Cities
Mhm.
back in 2020. Well, thank you. Such an inspiring set of wins. And we'll talk more about what they had to do in order to achieve those wins in just a little bit. But again, to get back to this idea of strikes are not a lose-lose situation. Strikes are an opportunity to make real wins in the workforce in a way that you are not able to without being prepared to strike. Another example of that is the incredible fights that happened with AFSCME on the University of Minnesota campus. Shireen, what were some of the things that you guys were able to achieve as a result of striking?
Thanks. It's a good question. So we were out on strike twice. The first time was in 2003, and it was only clerical workers that went out. We were out for 2 weeks at the time, and it was the first strike that had happened at the University of Minnesota in 65 years. And the university management was convinced that we wouldn't do it because it was a bunch of ladies. Our workforce is about 85% female. And I think similar to teachers, there's a perspective that that we have jobs where we're taking care of people or in service to people, and that if we weren't there, the professors that we worked for, the students that we served would be harmed by that. But we were very clear that that we needed dignity and respect on the job, and that we were going to stand up and fight for that, and that there's not a gender difference in the need for respect and dignity on the job, nor is there a gender difference in the need to stand up and fight for yourselves. And so we went out in 2003 for 2 weeks. And we were able to both push back on some takebacks that the university had proposed in negotiations. So one of them was that they wanted to eliminate the way that that you could retire. In public sector, there's the rule of 80 in terms of pension eligibility. And we had the rule of 65, which meant that if your age and the years of work added to 65, that you were able to then retire with insurance eligibility. I don't want to get into the weeds, but the university wanted to take that away, and we fought back against it and were able to preserve it. I will say that it was something that was lost at a later time, but we were able to preserve it longer than anyone else on campus as a result of going on strike. But we were also on offense with that, and were able to win some really significant protections around layoffs. And so one of the things that we were able to win was if someone is laid off and you're then rehired back in your position or back into a similar classification at the university, they would lay people off, and then they would try to ensure that you were working at much lower salaries. And we were able to win same salary on rehire off of the layoff list, which is really a significant thing. And it's really a protection for long-term workers in particular, that they would, and higher paid workers, that they would try and lay off in order to bring someone in at a lower salary. So that was a pretty major impact of that. In 2007, it was not just clerical workers, but clerical, technical, and healthcare workers that went out on strike. There were 3,000 of us at that time. We were out for 3 weeks. And it was really more of an offensive strike, I would say, rather than defense, rather than trying to push back when they were trying to take things away. We wanted to move forward. And we're really fighting for it. And so I think we were actually pretty eager to go on strike, especially because there was such a tremendous building of solidarity and community in 2003. There are intangible victories that you have through striking as well, where you build that connection with your coworkers, you gain a level of dignity and respect for yourself and for your coworkers. And those are things that, and build that community. And those are things that you never lose as a result. And we had that in 2003, 2007. I think we built on that as well. And we were really pushing to make headway economically. And we we actually went out on strike when there were 3% salary increases. Each year of the contract had already been part of the final offer that the university put forward, and we were pushing for more than that. We didn't get much more than that, I will say, but we wouldn't have even gotten that far if we hadn't actually been building up for a strike. Again, we had a lot of intangibles that were gained through it. It was a different situation as well in 2007. We were one of only 8 strikes in the country of 1,000 workers or more that year. So it was definitely not a situation where there were a lot of people out on strike, and there weren't a lot of people who were striking offensively rather than just defensively. And so the overall gains, I think, that we made between the start of the strike and the end of the strike were a little bit more reduced as a result. But again, we were able to get significantly more at the table leading into it, and we're able to make some gains as part of the strike. And I'll also just say it had long-term impacts in bargaining each year of the contract after that. And in particular around the issue of health insurance, where we know that employers are always trying to do takebacks, and they're trying to really cost shift as much as possible. And we've managed to maintain a very high quality, relatively low cost health insurance plan, and went for years where there were no changes in the economics of that as a result of being out on strike. So those are things that we gained both on the picket line and in the years afterwards.
Great. So, and a perfect example of both wins at the bargaining table and also the win organizationally about really bringing coworkers closer together. I know that's been true every time for Local 26. Each one-day strike we do, each step we take actually builds us and prepares our muscles for the next level and the next stage. Great. Eric, if you're able to jump on, and for folks who are just joining us, Eric is actually taking a little bit of time off of his shift to join us. So that's why he's only on audio right now. If you're able to join us by video, Eric, that's great. And give us a sense, what were you able to win at the bargaining table as a result of the strike?
Yeah, as a result of the strike, we secured some decent wage increases. It was like $1.80 and 60 cents. 70 cents. It was pretty decent, better than we were expecting to end up with, honestly, given the way they were bargaining with us. We also secured a fully funded apprenticeship program that is registered with the state, that is going to help us raise the standards in our industry, as I had mentioned before. We also gained a $1 night differential for when some of us are doing some seasonal work at these companies dealing with snow removal. And we touched on some various other parts of the contract that just needed general improving as well. As far as keeping people interested as we're on strike, that's always an ongoing struggle. But, you know, trying to keep the morale up with each other and keep everybody's head in the game is the biggest thing you can do. Quite often people will wind up getting a little disheartened at times, especially after 5 days. Like, for example, we were on strike for 10 days. So about halfway through that, you can kind of see people rethinking their positions. But if you're able to just hold out, the results really do just speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Great. So and Eric, such incredible wins, including the apprenticeship, the first time in the country getting a Windows apprenticeship, safety apprenticeship, paid for by the employer to really help reduce the number of deaths in that industry, was really a huge breakthrough. And you started to talk a little bit about how important it is to build unity once you're actually out on strike. I wanted, before we get to that question, because that's very important, as people think about striking, I want to take a step back first and ask each of you, so what did you do with your coworkers to get them ready to strike? Because we all know, that it's scary, right? Especially if you haven't gone on strike before, it's a very scary step. You think about your impact on your own family, you think about your impact on the people that you serve, whether it's students or your clients. So, you know, what kind of preparation did you have to do yourself and with your coworkers to get people strong and united so that they were ready to strike? Chung?
You know, to go on a strike, it's not an overnight thing. Okay, it takes time to organize, like you said, to get your members on board. For us, throughout negotiation, we had contract action teams, which I was a part of it with a teammate, and we attended the meetings, and we were able to bring back information to our buildings. Each of the building, almost all of the buildings have a action team or the contract action members that comes to the meetings and goes back and relay the information back to them. And then through conversations, dialogues, and that's how we got our members on board, you know. I want to say that, you know, nowadays with technology, we make it, you know, technology makes it an easier and a safe way to connect with people around you, with your, you know, with your coworkers, with other buildings. And it also is a way where it's easier for us to organize, you know, using technology nowadays to communicate too. So that was, and we took advantage of that. Okay, we took advantage of having the technology here. In addition, sorry, let me just grab him and.
That's great. Well, while Chong's working on that, Shireen, do you want to jump in and just say a little bit, what did you do to get your folks ready to strike, especially that first time?
Sure. And I empathize. I've got a puppy that hopefully will be quiet as well. So,
dogs do like strikes. I mean, I've
they
had numerous dogs on strikes.
They
yes.
do. They're good at walking. So the first time we went out in 2003, well, actually I'll pause just a minute and see if Chong wants to continue or if I should continue. What would you like, Greg?
Greg, your call. I could continue or.
Okay, Chong, if you're ready, why don't you finish up? That'd be great.
Okay, sure. So I was just saying that we took advantage of, you know, today's technology for a safe and a great way to communicate with and organize our members. With each school having at least one action team, one contract action members at the meetings, you know, information was relayed back to the buildings. And then we also have conducted a number of actions with their coworkers, such as, you know, doing the walk-ins, organizing that, doing the walk-ins, and then we, you know, encourage our members to wear by supporting our bargaining team wearing our red shirt every Thursday. We do rallies, and then you know, we did our rallies outside the board meetings. We were able to, you know, to be there, and during the nights that they were having meetings, we were able to be out there. And we have a lot of families and community members who came and supported us, you know. Mm-hmm. Also, each of the CAT members have really good we communicated with each other, and when we needed something, another members might have information, and that's how we helped each other out by relating information to our members, is having that open communication with the contract action teams and the members who are bargaining at the table, you know. So lots of information relating back and forth, having conversation with our co-workers at school, you know, at our buildings, taking question back and forth, and making sure that, you know, everybody have information that they needed it.
The
I
puppy
know
is missing you.
my baby is.
Yep. Let me just actually hold up. There's a term sometimes that we use as we're preparing for strikes that describes some of what Chong was just naming, which is we call them assessments. And the idea of assessments is that as you're going through a contract fight, getting ready for a strike, you are testing your own strength. And each test of your own strength should also show the employer that you're getting stronger. So it's both, you choose the tactic both to show the employer that you're getting stronger, like for example, everyone at SPFE wearing the red shirts on the bargaining days on Thursdays, right? So it's a way to show the employer we're strong, but it is also an assessment. It is a test of your own coworkers. Who is willing to wear a red shirt, who isn't, and those that aren't, it's a chance to sit down and really talk with them and help them understand. And as Chong said, that back and forth between what's happening in bargaining and communicating well to members so that people aren't confused and do know what's actually happening is super important. But that idea of assessments is a really critical thing that we've seen across many different kinds of strikes, measuring our strength before we actually do the strike. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and part of that is also we have, petitions. So then we know who, we know a number, how many members are backing us up during this whole process, and who's willing to be committed, into taking the action, taking these action forward. So these are some of the things that.
And just to hold that up, in a petition, we often think about who is signing it, which is important, but just as important is who doesn't sign it, right? To really think about who are our coworkers that aren't with us, not to be angry at them, but to convince them. That helps you focus on who do you need to really address to help bring them along. So Shireen, what were some of the things that you guys did to create unity as you were getting close to your deadline?
So I would say it maybe goes into 4 different categories. One is organization, and we also, similar to Chong, we had member action teams that we tried to have leaders in every workplace. We are located in 240 buildings on the Twin City campus, plus on all 5 campuses of the university system, plus a lot of county extension offices. So the communication network and having that is really strong. And people trust their coworkers more than they will trust someone that they don't know or don't have familiarity with. And so it was really important that we had coworkers talking to each other about why it was important, why they were going to strike, and to organize each other into doing that, I think was a really important part of it. Another aspect of it was just kind of inspiring people and capturing imagination, and really thinking about, whether that was with petitions that we were doing or actions, rallies that we had on campus, or whether it was, flyers that we had that could get the message out, that really served as a tool in some ways for people to talk to their coworkers, and an entry point on it. But it was also where we could call out the university administration and their hypocrisy, the fact that they would always say there was not enough money, we needed to share the pain, but sharing the pain when you're a low wage worker versus when you are making $300,000 a year, like the university president, there are different categories of that. So we had some kind of things that we did, like we had a pain, what we called a pain calculator, where you could plug in what your income, what your salary level was, and then what they wanted to do to health insurance, and what what increases they wanted to put in, and how exactly that pain was not being shared, right? And we showed the difference between, what increases would be for health insurance for, again, someone making several $100,000 a year versus someone making $25,000 a year. So that really galvanized people, because it pissed them off, and they really wanted to take a stand. Another aspect of it was transparency, so that people knew everything that was happening at the table. And I think that a lot of times unions make the mistake of getting sucked into confidential negotiations. The reality is that that means that the boss knows everything and your members know nothing. Right? Like the boss knows what's happening at the table. So who is it confidential from? It's confidential from your membership and your coworkers. And so we've always had a very strong position saying we can't do that. So we're clerical workers. So, you know, early on in 2003 and in 2007, actually, both of those, we did verbatim notes where it was word for word. You could hear exactly what level of disrespect the university negotiators were conveying to folks on the bargaining team. And people, you know, when you could read it, you knew that we weren't making up stories, that this was actually what was going on, that this was a level of disrespect that was there. And so that was a really important thing that we've done. We've also invited people in to join us for bargaining sessions. I think St. Paul Federation of Educators has really led the way on that. But that's another aspect of it. And then I think a fourth area is really just ensuring democracy throughout the process. And again, engaging our members and making sure that everyone's got a say in what's going on from the very beginning through the strike, and having people feel and really understand and own it, that it is theirs, it is ours, it is not someone else's decision to make, and providing all of the information so that people will both do that. And that really plays a role in organizing people. Just a couple of other things that we did that I think in 2007 were extremely important. And actually in 2003 as well, we had meeting after meeting after meeting and organizing day after organizing day where we would be talking to our coworkers. I think the 07 strike, we had pizza lunches in every building the entire summer. I couldn't eat pizza for years afterwards because it was every single day, and we would meet with small groups of coworkers and talk about how what was important. And because that was a year when we were talking about going on offense, we actually calculated how people were falling behind as it compared to the rate of inflation. Because what was happening is that people were, we were getting raises, but it wasn't keeping up, right? And so people, you know, we were hearing from folks that would say, well, we've gotten this raise, you know, this is the best that the university could do. And we wanted to demand that they do better. And so we actually had a formula that we calculated where we went back 10 years and then helped people figure out exactly what had happened to their wages compared to the rate of inflation over that time, so that they could see exactly what happened. And so it galvanized people, and it made them understand economics in a way that they hadn't before. And especially for a workforce primarily of women who will always say, oh, I don't do math. There's that stereotype that's there. For people to really understand exactly what was happening to their wages and why we needed to fight, that was really galvanizing. And that really helped mobilize people.
Great. Thanks, Shireen. And that has definitely been our experience over and over again as well at Local 26, is the more transparency and the more democracy that you can have in the preparation and the creation of your campaign and how you bargain. There's many different mechanisms. Shireen talked about some. At Local 26, we often do what we call open bargaining, which just means all of the members are invited. So we will sometimes have 100-person bargaining, 200-person bargaining committees, depending on what's happening. But whatever the mechanism, that idea of transparency, that idea of member participation and democracy absolutely will change the number of folks that are going to be ready to participate and take the big step of being on strike. Eric, what were some of the things that that you did with the window cleaners that really helped build unity before the strike?
Well, a big thing that helped build unity was our initial contract negotiation took part right as COVID was hitting us. So we kind of settled for an extension the first time, which ended a year later. And there were a lot of promises made at the table the first time around that were not fulfilled. And even though we did get an extension, we won $1 from them in the pandemic, but they had promises that were well above that in other areas, as well as financial. So by the time it came back around to sit at the table again, everyone was already so furious, and the way the employers had been approaching us had been felt as disrespectful by a majority, if not all of the employees and members, that it was pretty much a unified, unanimous vote to go on strike from the moment the idea was brought up, almost after the first meeting with them. So it wasn't a tough decision at all for many of us. And I think, you know, a lot of the people that were working had kind of had a little bit of a nest egg saved up. It also helped that we had a strike fund saved with our union that gave us at least a little something to help pay the bills while we didn't have a paycheck coming in. So there was a lot of support from the union on that front as well.
Great. So let's talk about now that next step of a strike. You do all the preparation, you get everything in place. You've got the transparency, you've got the communication, you've got the assessments, and then the day comes, the employer refuses to do what's right, and so you and your coworkers go out on strike. When you're on the picket line, it takes work, right? It's not like it's just a vacation. It's not like you just stay at home and withdraw your labor. Striking is an active thing. So what did you guys do to keep momentum, to keep escalating the pressure on the employer even after you were out on strike, and to keep your coworkers together and unified, because it's a lot of pressure? Chung?
That's an open communication. Yeah. You know, I was one of the lead person. So my partner and I have, I believe, 6 schools that we continuously communicate with their CAT person, the contract action team person at each of the schools. So we communicate with them. We have an open communication. Any information we get, we send it to them right away. And during the actual picket, you know, when we're out there, my team and I, my partner and I drove around to talk to them, to see what they needed. If we have information, that was the way where we would do it. We just drove around. You know, the one thing that I missed was not being at my school doing the actual action with them. But I got my kids to be there, to be involved. But I would, you know, since I wasn't there, and we took lots of pictures, and then we share pictures. And like I said, any information that was needed to be out there, and it was our job to be out there to make sure that things are going, whatever they are, you know, if there's any problems, we were there to help out with. So it is a busy, you know, we get up, we go, and we travel to the different sites. We talk to all of the members. We encourage them to, you know, to help each other out. And I gotta say that I was just awed by the community. You know, they brought coffee, they brought donuts, they brought lunch, you know, seriously, whatever. They provided the building that we were, you know, that we were able to be kept warm, water, you know, you name it, they were there for us too. So just keeping, you know, with that kind of support from the district, from our community, it really uplifted our members' spirit. Having that kind of support, being there with, we looked at each other, we're like, okay, what can you do if you can't be out there, you know, doing the actual walking? What can you do to help the other members? You know, we have members who were like, okay, I'll stay in the building that was open for us. I'll make sure that there's coffee. I'll make sure that the flyers are ready to go. I'll make sure that there's, you know, there's something that was needed that would be there. I'll run to the store and get what we need. You know, that's how it comes down to it. It's you support each other. You're there.
Great. And part of what Chung is raising, I think, is so critical. We often think of those as roles. having you and your coworkers take specific roles, like she was talking about, actually having folks take different jobs at each different work site, having a person be over the 6 work sites. As people take responsibilities for different roles, it helps hold down the logistics of the strike, but it also gives people an important job to do while on strike. It's not like everybody's just sitting around waiting for the boss to say uncle. Like, it actually really requires a division of labor, just like in the work site. But now it's different because now you're producing a strike. Shireen, what were some of the things?
Yeah, everybody had a different role to play, you know, even
Mhm.
those who, like I said, even those who can't be out there, you know? So.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Yep. Shireen, how about for you? What did you guys do to build that unity even once you were out on strike?
Yeah, there were some similar things to what Chong was talking about. But, you know, within the public sector, I think it's important to understand that strike is political and not production oriented or production ending. In other words, you know, the employer makes money when we're not working, right? Because they don't have to pay us, but they've already gotten their money from other sources. And so I think a lot of times people think that it is just about like withholding your labor. That is a very important part of it, but it's also about provoking a political crisis and putting pressure on them to reach a settlement. And so that means it needs to be very public. It needs to be very, very visible, you know, from day to day. And so, so some of the things that we did to really create as much visibility as possible and also build unity for our members included things like throughout the strike, every day we would have a unity rally. We would have pickets that were there in the morning, and then we would bring everyone together again because we were dispersed throughout the university campus. So on the Twin Cities campus, we would have a rally every day. We would bring people together. It would also be a point where supporters could come in. We could message. You feel not only, you know, the importance of working on the picket line and being there with your direct coworkers, but also being part of something much bigger. So that was important. We had a daily strike newsletter where we would have photos and quotes and songs and chants that people wrote on one picket line that we could share on another so that you'd hear and see what someone else was doing. I was also similar to Chong, I was in strike headquarters, so I wasn't at the picket line with my coworkers at the Humphrey School where I worked every day, but being able to see what was happening through the newsletter, I think was really important. We also would do mass meetings of our strikers. We rented a church for strike headquarters. And so we would have meetings of 1,000 people where we would make our decisions about where are we going to go with this? Like what's our next step? What are we going to do? And how can people plug in? So that, again, it was really feeling ownership of that. That it was all of us in it together. I think that was really a really important thing. And then we really created space for bringing in community supporters and developed a community solidarity table where we had students and faculty and community members that met regularly and took actions to support us. So we had signs that we distributed saying, "We support you workers," signs and buttons. So faculty and staff who weren't part of our bargaining unit, who weren't striking, could also show their support. We had over 400 faculty members who took their classes off campus because they refused to cross the picket line. So all of those students, we did education about it. We had students who did civil disobedience, took over the president's office, students who did a hunger strike to show their support, which again got a lot of media attention, and showed that we were striking for ourselves, but we weren't standing alone. Even as clerical workers, we were standing, we were the voice of conscience for the university. So that was a bit of some of the things that we did. And then we just really had fun. We really tried to build fun on the picket line. So it wasn't just about like, you know, you're marching, you're holding the sign. That's really important. But we had, you know, people were writing songs and dancing and just having a really good time, because it's like you're working every day. It's hard. You get this opportunity on the picket line of just being your whole self and just being with your coworkers and building this community that you don't get in any other way. And so making those connections and having fun, you know, there were folks where when both strikes ended, they were like, "I don't really want to go back. This is so beautiful." Right. And so that's the dynamic that you want to create and just again, build that sense of community and solidarity that really you don't find, I've never found anywhere else.
So beautiful. Totally agree. Eric, how did you and your coworkers hold it together and keep that momentum up on the line?
Well, there was a lot of people that were driving past and honking and pumping their fist, and there were others that would kind of join us and help keep our spirit up. That helped a lot. We were pumping a lot of music, try to have a barbecue out there. We made some burgers, fed some people, screen printing t-shirts. We did a bunch of those in the wind, which was hilarious to watch those try to blow away as we're trying to let them dry. There was support from other unions, donations that came through that kept us going right in the middle when we really needed it most. There were janitors at the airport who our union also represents that were able to come join us on the line at Terminal 1 and didn't go to work that day and stood the line with us. So that was a huge thing to really help keep the morale of everybody going and let us know we were on the right track.
Great. I so agree. I just think Shireen just talked about it. It's like there's a culture that can happen on a picket line, and it really is some of the closest relationships I also have ever had in my life. And also breaking down a lot of the divisions that folks often have in the workplace, right? The workplace is all about different little pockets of people competing with each other, ranked in a hierarchy, often in Minnesota and around the world. That's also deals a lot with gender and race and how people get divided from each other. And on the picket line, you have to come together, otherwise you just lose. It's very simple. And so, the connections and the human relationships that are made always surprise me, and whether it's the theme on, I think each strike line kind of ends up getting its own themes. And so this most recent one with the window cleaners, Eric actually came up with this idea of the employers have our Tyrannosaurus Rexes, and they have their short little arms, and they have to get their short little arms into their deep pockets. So that became kind of the theme of the strike. And so on the picket line, people were like doing arm wrestling and laughing about the short arms of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and then that became our image on our T-shirts. And then when we were actually in bargaining, I'm not kidding. So some of the workers actually bought the big inflatable Tyrannosaurus Rex, and so we're parading around with the Tyrannosaurus Rex in bargaining. And then, Eric, what happened on the final day when we actually won the strike and the employers came in to sign?
It was pretty great. One of the employers, my boss personally, Michael Lesage, had a great sense of humor about everything, and he did in fact come in one of them inflatable T-Rex armed outfits, the whole shebang, and he signed it well dressed up as the dinosaur. So
a Tyrannosaurus Rex signed the final tentative agreement.
Yes, he finally managed to get his short arms into his deep pockets. That's right.
But whatever it looks like, it's like each picket line has its own culture, and that's something beautiful to watch for, because this is when people can be their whole selves, and people will remember it for a long time. Well, great. So we're coming to the end of our time. Shang, Eric, Shireen, thank you so much for your ideas. Are there any other pieces you just want to name, or that kind of came up for you as you were hearing some of the experiences of others that you want to make sure people who are out there, we have over 100 listeners that have jumped on, as they're wrestling with thinking about going out on strike, whether that's in Minneapolis or in St. Paul, any final words you want to give to them?
Yeah, I want to say you're not alone. Okay. You might be in your own building, working with the people around you. Your world doesn't end within those walls. And when you go out there, you see a whole lot of other people who are just fighting to want what you want. So communicate with don't just say, okay, these are the people that I'm working with. Open up, support each other, because you don't know who can help you out there. When we were out there, it was amazing we just thought, okay, this is our building. These are the people we're working with. But when I drove around, I was amazed at the people that were out there. I got to know a lot of the other people in the other buildings. And I'm just amazed at what they can do as a whole group, what we could do together. So don't just say, this is it. There's a lot of other people out there who will be fighting with you. Just open up.
Right
I
on.
would-
Shireen?
I would just say, take that leap of faith in yourself, in your coworkers. Being on strike is incredible. It's exhilarating. It is, it's life-changing, and it changes your relationship with your employer as well. There's a level of respect that you gain in being out on the picket lines and saying, we're standing up for ourselves, and we deserve more, and we're going to fight for more. And that's a really important thing, and that's an intangible that you get from being on strike that you don't get from anything else. And like Chong said, you're going to have support there, the tremendous outpouring of community support, and you find all of your labor allies and family members who are there standing up with you, and that's really, again, just a beautiful thing. And so having the opportunity, if you get the opportunity to experience it, you got to do the organizing. You really got to do the organizing and have a clear strategy. But take the opportunity when you get it.
Great. Eric, any final shot?
Absolutely. I mean, there will be times when you're second guessing if holding out was the right thing to do, because it's that they're going to keep trying to shoot you down on their offers. That's what happened to us. But the more we stuck it out, the more traction that we gained, the more worthwhile it became when we ultimately achieved what we were after. And I would just say, stick with it. Don't give up. Because as my union says, when we fight, we win.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And for folks who are watching, if you do have more questions, please do talk to folks in your own union about the details of where your own bargaining is. We and the other locals here are all here in support. So anything we can do to help support all the workers that have contracts expiring in these next few months, we're here for you. All right. When we fight, we win. Take care.